Welcome back to the Layman's Globe. All right, let's dive right into this explainer today and unravel what is honestly one of the most fascinating paradoxes in modern geopolitics. We're looking at a NATO ally that routinely frustrates Washington, buys advanced weapons from Russia, argues with Europe, and yet, despite all of that, remains utterly, completely indispensable to the Western security alliance. I mean, how exactly does a country manage that kind of incredible balancing act?
With global leaders gearing up to meet in Ankara on July 7th and 8th for a highly anticipated summit, we really have to ask ourselves a fundamental question here. Is Turkey becoming NATO's most powerful middleman, or are they simply its most skillful bargainer? You see, by controlling the naval gateway to the Black Sea and acting as this mediator to NATO's rivals, Turkey has effectively positioned itself as the ultimate swing ally. So, to make sense of this whole complex dynamic, we're going to break it down into three quick parts today: anatomy of leverage, the alliance trust deficit, and finally, the Ankara summit stakes.
All right, let's kick things off with part one, anatomy of leverage. We're unpacking Turkey's power.
Let's start with the cold, hard reality of why NATO absolutely needs Turkey. We're talking about a nation that operates the alliance's second-largest army and hosts critical, frankly irreplaceable infrastructure like the Incirlik Air Base. The core idea here is that Turkey isn't necessarily NATO's strongest member, and no, they can't command the alliance, but they might just be NATO's most important swing ally. Their power doesn't come from outright military or economic dominance over the West. Instead, it's all about real estate. They are so strategically located and deeply embedded in so many regional conflicts that neither the West nor its rivals can comfortably ignore them.
You know, Ankara's massive geopolitical influence is really built on five factual pillars. First off, they've got the Black Sea Gateway. Under the 1936 Montreux Convention, Turkey legally controls the Bosphorus Strait during wartime, which is huge. Then, there's their military weight, hosting major radar sites and air bases connecting Europe's defense right to the Middle East. Add to that their incredible diplomatic access. I mean, Turkey maintains working channels with Russia, Ukraine, Iran, and the Gulf, and they've even hosted Russia-Ukraine negotiations. Plus, they boast a booming defense industry. And finally, because NATO literally requires unanimous agreement to make big moves, Turkey has masterfully learned how to convert its single vote into massive consensus power and negotiating leverage.
$10 billion. That's the estimated value of Turkish defense exports right now, which, by the way, have tripled since 2021. To put that into perspective, they are rapidly shifting from just being a consumer security to a major global supplier. We're talking about highly effective drones, armored systems, ships, and missiles being sold all over the world. They're even developing their own advanced Khan fighter jet, so they aren't just buying weapons anymore. They are fundamentally changing the global marketplace.
Moving right along to part two, the alliance trust deficit, and exactly why all this friction persists.
Because despite all this deep military integration and shared infrastructure, there's a serious underlying suspicion here. It repeatedly swings this alliance between periods of total crisis and these really tense resets. The most glaring symbol of this trust deficit, well, it's the unresolved rupture over Turkey buying the Russian S-400 air defense system. When Turkey bought that system from Moscow, Washington argued it created massive security risks. This triggered U.S. sanctions, and Turkey actually got kicked out of the advanced F-35 fighter jet program. Now, Washington did recently move forward with a $700 million jet engine sale for Turkey's own Khan fighter, which, sure, it improves the mood a bit, but it absolutely hasn't fully patched this underlying rupture.
And look, the friction goes way beyond just buying weapons. Turkey pulls off this massive balancing act across regional flashpoints. For instance, they condemn Russia's invasion and supply weapons to Kyiv, but at the same time, they refuse to sever energy ties with Putin or join broad Western sanctions. Then there's the ongoing security dispute. Ankara is constantly demanding that NATO treat its southern security concerns, specifically regarding the PKK and Kurdish-led forces in Syria, just as seriously as threats on NATO's eastern flank. Throw in the fact that Turkey sharply diverges from Washington on issues surrounding Gaza, Israel, and Iran, and, well, you can see why automatic, seamless cooperation is practically impossible.
So, what does this all mean? It basically boils down to one massive contradiction. On one side, NATO expects a predictable, fully aligned alliance member, right? But on the other side, Turkey demands strategic autonomy. Turkey firmly believes that cooperating with multiple global power centers to increase its own freedom of action is simply the price NATO has to pay to keep Ankara inside the Western security system. Which brings us to part three, the Ankara summit stakes. We're looking at the facts versus the possibilities.
Okay, so at this upcoming July summit, President Erdoğan, U.S. leaders, representatives from all 32 NATO members, and partners from the Gulf are literally going to collide head-on over these exact contradictions. Going in, both sides are bringing very distinct demands to the table. Erdoğan is looking for relief from U.S. and European defense restrictions, a real pathway out of those CAATSA sanctions, inclusion in European security initiatives, and tangible support against PKK networks. NATO, meanwhile, desperately needs Turkey to step up defense output, manage Black Sea maritime security, maintain its logistical support and radar coverage, and act as a bridge to Gulf partners as NATO expands its own agenda.
Now, pivoting from the known facts to the actual possibilities, analysts are pointing to 4 potential outcomes for this summit. While a strategic reset or a complete breakdown are both technically possible, take a look at the second scenario: transaction without trust. This is deemed the most likely result for sure. It means jet engine contracts get signed, unity gets projected for the cameras, but the core, deep-seated disputes over the S-400, the F-35, and Syria, those remain entirely frozen. We could also totally see Ankara cementing its status as a long-term regional security hub out of all this.
Now you might be wondering, why does this matter to me if I don't follow NATO politics every single day? Well, because decisions made in Ankara create massive global ripple effects. Seriously, if Turkey shapes a mission around the Strait of Hormuz, that directly impacts global shipping insurance, crude oil prices, and overall inflation. Their management of the Black Sea dictates the flow of global food and fertilizer, literally impacting global food security. Furthermore, Turkey is writing the modern blueprint for how middle powers can balance being in an alliance while maintaining their own autonomy. And finally, their rise as a weapons supplier is fundamentally rewiring the global defense marketplace across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East.
Ultimately, what this explainer and the upcoming Ankara summit prove is something pretty profound about the future of global politics. In a fragmented world, the most influential countries aren't always the strongest. Sometimes it's the ones who control the routes, talk to the rivals, and know exactly when to say yes and exactly when to make everyone else wait. Turkey has absolutely mastered that art. So will the upcoming summit finally force them to pick a side, or will it just cement their status as the world's most indispensable middleman? Thanks so much for joining me on A Layman's Globe, and definitely keep your eyes on Ankara.